Natalie hit it huge, getting cast as Padme / Princess Amidala, Queen Amidala, in the new Star Wars reboot, The Phantom Menace Trilogy. And this was in 1999. And although The Phantom Menace was critically disliked, this film still made almost $1 billion at the box office, which was absurd in 1999. And it turned Natalie into an overnight global star.
Yeah, I mean, it's the first time anyone's seen a Star Wars movie in 20 years, so it had so much built up around it, and she's one of the leads. And I'm sure they must have auditioned thousands of kids for this, because I think she was like 16 or 17 when she filmed it. I would say that of the 3 Star Wars films that she's in, this is probably her best story arc and character role in all 3 films.
Absolutely, because they kind of did to Queen Amidala and Padme what they did with Finn in the newer trilogy. I mean, Finn's a great character in the first one.
Yeah.
He's got a lot to do, great plot line.
He's holding a lightsaber at the end.
Tons of character development, and you think, wow, they're going to do so much with Finn with the other 2 movies. And then his character, they kind of just fizzle him out, and he's not as important, really, as Rey and Poe, and then Adam Driver, freaking Kylo Ren, anger management. So... like, as Finn fizzles out towards the end of the trilogy, same thing with Padme. Even though she's a very complex character and has a lot to do in like the books and the TV shows,
in the first movie,
and the lore, and in the first movie, she's kicking ass and holding guns and shooting guns and everything. She kind of just fizzles out towards the third movie, where she's kind of just there to be like Anakin's love interest, and obviously has to give birth to the twins, which is part of her story arc. But I feel like they could have done a lot more interesting things with Padme, made her more integral to the story, and it seems like they sacrificed her plots and her character development for Anakin's character development.
Yeah, she lost her impact on the story by Revenge of the Sith completely. But let's talk about the first one for a bit, because I think it's a really strong character in the film, because she plays pretty much 2 roles. She plays Queen Amidala and she plays Padme.
I know, when the twist came that she was actually Padme, it was Queen Amidala, I was like, oh my god, no way.
Really cool fact is that when she was using the deceptive practice, when she was playing one of Queen Amidala's so-called servants, Keira Knightley was playing Queen Amidala. And so when Padme is not covered in makeup and she's just one of the people on the side, that's always Keira Knightley in the makeup with crazy hair pretending to be the queen. And they look so much alike already, but when they had the makeup on, their own parents couldn't even tell them apart.
Yeah. They're very similar looking people.
Yeah. Padme has a lot to do in this one, and even in the second one. Politically, she has a lot of power within the Republic, first as the queen, and then when she becomes a senator in the second one. So she has a lot to do in the first one. She has a lot of responsibility.
A lot of impact on the galaxy.
Yeah, because she's the leader of an entire planet. And so her decisions are always putting her people first, what's best for her planet. And she's a very good leader and seems to always make the right decisions.
Yeah, Padme, you can't help but love her in the Phantom Menace, and she's one of the best parts of the movie. And yeah, she's complex in that film too. And Natalie actually didn't even actively pursue Star Wars. She got offered the part after meeting with George Lucas, and still took a few weeks to decide if she wanted to take the role or not. And again, she was still a teenager. I think she was 14 when she had the meeting, and they started filming when she was like 16 or 17. And you know, when you're in your teens, and you know you've been in movies, but you also want to live like a teenager and have somewhat of a normal life. And so it's a big decision to sacrifice, your teenage years and going into your young adult life, because you're going to work on 3 major blockbuster films in the next 6 years, which are going to take up pretty much most of your time. Yeah. And so she ended up doing it, and it worked out. I think she's perfect for the role, of course.
Yeah, she's great, and she obviously, like we said earlier, she's extremely striking looking, and the camera loves her. And combining that with her ability to really act and emote is just a winning. It's a knockout combination for an actor.
Yeah, and Amidala and Padme, I think, is a really important role, because you're rebooting the trilogy from the original Star Wars, which was so iconic. And just like they did with the Star Wars Force Awakens trilogy, Lucasfilms used like kind of a similar character format from the original Star Wars trilogy, where you have like the 2 guy leads as well as a female lead, and like one of the guys is like comic relief almost, and there's a Jedi or almost Jedi, as well as people who are strong with the Force.
The kid who grows up on a desert planet.
Yeah, so
there's a princess.
If anyone doesn't realize, Star Wars is the same trilogy every time. But also, this is the first time they rebooted it, and Princess Leia is such an iconic character that they kind of had to get it right. They had to try to at least match what Leia was in terms of to the lore and how important of a character she was to everybody who was a fan of Star Wars. And I think they did a great job in the first one with Padme.
Yeah, and when she's a diplomat and when she is the queen, Lucas digitally enhanced her voice to really deepen it. So that's why when she's speaking as the queen, her voice is like so deep and powerful.
Yeah, and they actually spent a lot of time, her and Lucas, developing the accent and dialect of Padme because they wanted to sound very like classical Hollywood, like starlets like Audrey Hepburn and Lauren Bacall. So that's why Queen Amidala has this very distinct, like noble sounding voice, and it's like a cross between those starlets and like some sort of a classical British accent. It's really interesting.
Yeah, you can see this side of her that's a sweet young woman who always wants to do the right thing, and then when she meets Anakin, they share a few scenes of it's not quite like Leon and Matilda, but they're also Lucas sprinkled little bits of hinting at them having a personal and intimate connection. But although it can be pretty awkward at times.
Yeah, when Anakin's the little kid, he's like 8 years old.
Yeah, there's some awkward dialogue between them.
At least it's not as bad as Blank Check.
Yeah, that's true. Oh my God, Blank Check.
But I mean, however, despite the box office, Phantom Menace was initially a disappointment and still is because we were talking about this earlier. You know, picture being a massive fan of the original Star Wars trilogy, which were, you know, adult films and kid films. There were a lot of mature themes in it, and they were kind of just seemed like an older, like teenage adult audience. And then for 20 years, you're waiting for the sequels to come out. They're going to reboot, and you're very excited. And then you go and you see the Star Wars, the new trilogy, and they kind of just toned it down to make it for like kids. Like the audience was like 8, 9-year-old kids. They're trying to sell toys. And it's not that there's still not great movies, and you still have like great lightsaber battles and lots of interesting like dialogue and story arcs, but still they kind of toned it down, made it very family friendly, and really again marketing towards kids.
Yeah, so I think probably the biggest downside which led to that was deciding to portray Anakin as a really young kid, as like an 8-year-old. I think that if Anakin was a young teenager, maybe 14, 15, it probably would have worked out a little bit better. But since he was so young, they formed the film around that audience, young kids. So I think the whole pod racing plot was literally just to sell video games and toys, which is why they put the pod racing in.
And Jar Jar Binks. Jar Jar Binks is only entertaining people who are under 11 years old. Yeah. No adults like Jar Jar Binks, man.
Yeah, and the thing is, if they had made the Star Wars film like the original trilogy and kept it with more adult themes and a mostly adult cast, kids still would have turned out. It still would have made $1 billion. So.
Yeah, exactly. And then Padme, like we were talking about earlier, she pretty much vanished in terms of from the narrative.
In Attack of the Clones, Padme and Anakin rekindled their relationship. Anakin's a young adult now. But what happened was George Lucas, instead of giving her a strong storyline, she ends up just becoming an intimate and sexual object for Anakin. And the entire storyline for them in the film is them falling in love.
Yeah, and like the scenes where they're at her house or in like her estate.
Yeah, they go to
It's cute, but like still you're kind of just diluting Padme's character and Queen Amidala's character.
Yeah, and the structure of the story is there's like 5 scenes of them doing like he's protecting her at her home, and there's like 5 different scenes of them just laughing and giggling and talking about ex-boyfriends and girlfriends and stuff. And then meanwhile, Obi-Wan's like taking shit and doing crazy shit the entire time, like going on these insane missions, like doing all the work. And then Anakin and Padme are just like prancing around in fields, and it kind of ruins the film, and it doesn't feel well. It doesn't feel right.
Yeah, it happens a lot to a lot of female characters in Hollywood, unfortunately, because, again, Padme was such a strong, interesting, and complex character, and then you're talking about the dilution of her to just being like a female relationship for Anakin. It kind of ruins it for me in terms of Padme, because they could have done so much with her by the end of the trilogy.
If Anakin was older in the first one, by now they could have been a more naturally growing relationship between them two. But in this film, it's just so very forced, and it feels so unnatural. Like when Anakin sees her again after 10 years, he tells Obi-Wan that he's been thinking about her every day since he was 10 years old.
Psycho.
Which is a little obsessive. And he also tells Obi-Wan that instead of nightmares, he wishes he could just dream about Padme every night. It's just, and it's just it's so forced that and Anakin literally just spouts out everything he's feeling inside. So it lost any kind of subtlety or natural growth between them two.
So many red flags. Like, I would never want to date someone who's been thinking of me every day for 10 years or dreams about me every night.
And then there's that scene where Anakin's looking at her like super sexually, and then and Padme goes, "Stop looking at me, you're making me uncomfortable." And then Anakin just smirks at her. It's like, what the fuck?
they ruined Padme's character. It's too bad, man.
Yeah. So she lost her power in the story. And then, but what ends up happening in this film is that Chancellor Palpatine, being the dark Sith Lord that we end up discovering he sets up Anakin and Padme to get back together, because he secretly carried out that initial attack on Padme's ship. When Padme goes to the council asking about the attack, Chancellor Palpatine is the one who recommends that Anakin and Obi-Wan protect her, because he knows that he needs Anakin and Padme to get together in order to create Darth Vader
and fulfill the prophecy.
Yeah, so he knows that Anakin's love for Padme will ultimately destroy him. So he sets this all up. Being the Sith Lord, he can see into the future, and he knows exactly what strings to pull. And so there's this great dynamic between Padme and the Chancellor, where she thinks that he's a great diplomat and a friend and an ally, but ultimately he's been using her and Anakin the entire time. And then with Revenge of the Sith, Padme is pretty much just, like we said, been reduced to Anakin's wife. She's completely lost any kind of plot development or character arc. All that happens to her in this film is she gets pregnant, and then she worries about Anakin.
Does a lot of pleading and begging.
And then they have that final scene together on the lava planet, and that's pretty much her entire plot in this film. So ultimately, yes, her character carries out a very important act in giving birth to Luke and Leia, but her plot development in this movie is just completely absent. I think she even disappears for more than an hour in the movie, where it's just like, what the hell happened to Padme?
Because when Obi-Wan and Anakin are on their missions, like for like an hour and 10, you don't even see her at all, and she's just kind of like, they just forget about her. And again, like we said earlier, they took her out of the narrative, basically sacrificed her storylines for Anakin's storylines.
Yeah, which I think was a mistake. If they kept it more balanced, then the relationship could have had a stronger impact on the story. But ultimately, Padme's main storyline is that Anakin foresaw her death of giving birth in a dream, and so she's trying to deal with the idea that she could possibly die in childbirth, which ultimately happens because that foresight in the fear of losing Padme is what drives Anakin to the dark side, and going to the dark side is what ends up causing her death at childbirth.
Because he's the one who harms her and forces the childbirth issues.
So it's this ironic tragedy of, by trying to prevent her death, he caused her death. And so if he had just listened to her, none of this would have happened.
And then we'll talk about the Star Wars trilogies at some point soon. And we'll cover this one, the Phantom Menace trilogy, because although they have flaws, there's some great parts of them, especially the lightsaber battles are badass in this trilogy.
Great battles.
I mean, the lava planet battle between Obi-Wan and Anakin is one of the best in the entire lore and franchise of the movies.
Yeah, it's fantastic.
So we'll touch on them at some point eventually, but
Obi-Wan's great. I love
Ewan McGregor as
Ewan
Obi-Wan.
McGregor as Obi-Wan. He's great.
Man. He can be my Obi-Wan any day.
He'll give you an Obi-Wan.